In 2025, neuroscience is sounding an early warning. Using AI tools like ChatGPT may come with measurable cognitive costs. One widely discussed preprint from MIT's Media Lab reported about a 47% reduction in brain activity when participants wrote essays with AI assistance compared to doing it on their own. The sample was small, and the study hasn't completed peer review, but paired with surveys and follow-up research, experts caution that the pattern points to real risks of cognitive offloading. The heart of the issue is that our brains are wired to conserve effort. That shortcut once helped us survive, but today it may be undermining how we think. And now the question is, what happens when the numbers reveal just how steep the collapse can be? The critical thinking collapse. What researchers labeled the critical thinking collapse didn't come from a single number. In the MIT Media Lab preprint that drew so much attention in 2025, they reported 3 striking findings. First, during writing tasks, participants who used large language models showed about 47% lower EEG activity and connectivity compared to those who wrote unaided, a sign that core decision-making networks were far less engaged. Second, although their output looked polished, LLM users wrote roughly 60% faster, while also demonstrating a 32% drop in what researchers called relevant cognitive load. In plain terms, their brains were doing less of the heavy lifting normally required for reasoning and problem-solving. And perhaps most worrying, follow-up tests revealed that about 83% of participants couldn't accurately recall or even quote the text they had just produced with AI help. Those numbers are jarring, but they need careful interpretation. The study was a preprint, not yet peer-reviewed, with a relatively small sample size of 54 participants across its initial sessions. Later rounds had even fewer, so it can't provide final proof. The trends are strong enough to raise alarms, but the researchers themselves emphasize that longer-term and larger studies are essential before drawing hard conclusions. Still, even preliminary signals matter when they point to the possibility that outsourcing too much mental labor dulls engagement across multiple dimensions. Speed without retention, production without depth, and polish without practice. To understand why this collapse feels so consequential, consider how working unaided engages the brain. When you wrestle with even a simple task, say calculating numbers on paper, your brain activates circuits for working memory, attention, and error correction. That struggle is not wasted effort. It is the sequence that creates skill. Shift the task to AI, and you see the answer instantly without activating those circuits. The result may look correct, but your mind has skipped the very steps that strengthen it. It's not unlike choosing to ride a drone across a field instead of walking it yourself. You reach the other side, but your legs, balance, and stamina never get tested. This shortcutting is where the idea of cognitive debt makes sense. Just as financial debt lets you enjoy something now, but forces repayment later, cognitive debt trades away training today for weakness tomorrow. A single request to an AI won't erase your abilities, but repeated substitution builds up the cost. Over weeks and months, what once felt natural, recalling details, tracking logic, building an argument, can start to feel harder, slower, even hazy. It's not that the skills disappear overnight, but they gradually lose fluency, much like muscles atrophying after too much inactivity. That pattern also showed in the neural recordings from the 2025 trials. When participants solved logic problems independently, their EEG patterns reflected high-frequency activity associated with alertness. When they leaned on AI assistance, though, many traces shifted toward the slower rhythms usually seen during drowsiness or light sleep. Outwardly, they appeared engaged, upright posture, eyes fixed, fingers on the keyboard. But inside, their neural activity suggested drift, as if the brain was sliding into standby mode. Some argued that saving energy is no bad thing. Why not let the brain rest while the machine works? The flaw in that reasoning lies in how neurons adapt. Connections between them follow a use it or lose it principle. Without continued rehearsal of reasoning steps, brain networks don't simply stay idle, they weaken. Over time, the forest paths of cognition grow over and fade. The effects rarely announce themselves with one dramatic failure. Instead, you sense a slow rising fog. Hesitation on problems you once mastered, impatience during challenges, difficulty recalling details that once came easily. That's the hidden interest you pay on cognitive debt. Math offered a clear illustration in the trials. Writing equations, holding interim sums, and correcting small errors build not just arithmetic skill, but general habits of sequencing and error detection. These transfer into broader decision-making. By contrast, handing over every step to an AI produced answers that looked efficient, but left no lasting footprint in memory or skill. The researchers stressed this point again and again. The issue is not speed. Fast work, while actively engaged, can still be rich training. Bypassing practice entirely erases the gains that practice would have delivered. And it wasn't only math or logic that suffered. The same study tracked participants constructing written arguments. Those who received AI polishing performed well initially, but when tested without assistance afterward, they stumbled more than peers who had done all of the writing themselves. Neural scans supported the findings. Even when their essays gleamed with AI aid, the cortical firing behind them was predictably weaker. A surface gloss disguised an interior collapse. Another sobering detail was how universal the effect seemed. In early reports, the drop was not restricted to young students or tech enthusiasts. Middle-aged workers, older adults, and even participants who described themselves as skeptical of AI all showed similar reductions when they relied on LLMs. The brain adjusts to habit, not to personal intention. Whether cautious or overconfident, those who substituted repeated steps with machine output experienced less activity and weaker recall. That's why neuroscientists kept returning to the image of blackouts. The scans showed robust, city-like patterns of activity during natural, unaided problem-solving. Then, as AI filled in answers, entire regions dimmed in unison, like sections of a city losing power block by block. What worried them was not a minor flicker, but the possibility of repeated outages becoming the brain's new baseline. This explains why the phrase critical thinking collapse hit a nerve. The evidence doesn't suggest a tiny trimming of effort. It describes a deep silence settling over cognitive functions central to reasoning and memory. LLMs can deliver impressive shortcuts, but they seem to lull the very networks we depend on to remain sharp. Even unfinished as the study was, it points toward a broader truth. The shallow ease of AI use doesn't just replace effort in the moment. It might also dull the mind's readiness across time. And yet, there's an important nuance that often gets lost. The collapse is not inevitable. The same researchers hinted that when AI is used in a more interactive way, questioning it, challenging its output, treating it as a sparring partner rather than a substitute, the brain may keep many of its circuits active. That potential deserves its own discussion, and we'll return to that later. For now, remember this detail. The problem isn't the existence of AI, it's how we let it replace processes that our brains need to practice. Recognizing the cost of foregoing effort brings us to a deeper layer of the story. The tendency to reach for easier routes when harder ones build strength isn't new at all. It is part of something far more ancient, written into how the brain evolved to save calories and effort. That instinct once protected us, but in a world filled with constant shortcuts, it takes on a very different role. Addicted to easy. Addicted to easy is not a metaphor. It's the everyday reality of how modern brains interact with technology. The wiring that once nudged humans toward conserving energy now collides with machines designed to give us effortless answers. What began as survival instinct transforms into a bias for convenience, and in today's environment, that bias is no longer neutral. It pulls us toward behaviors that steadily replace active thought with passive consumption. Instead of a single clear choice between danger and safety, we now live surrounded by frictionless options. Type a question and receive a full solution. Skim a pre-written outline rather than wrestle with a blank page. Navigate instantly without recalling routes or learning maps. Each of these instances feels trivial, yet every time, the brain sidesteps the chance to practice. The habit of skipping effort, once rare, becomes constant. The danger is not just that people prefer shortcuts. The deeper issue lies in how repetition rewires reward systems. Each time you let AI shoulder the work, your brain releases a little spark of relief. What might have taken focus and strain now feels resolved in seconds. That soothing effect repeats often enough, and the cycle becomes automatic. Confronted with effort, your mind learns to recoil. Offered a shortcut, it learns to prefer it. Over time, working through a challenge unaided feels progressively more uncomfortable. Imagine the difference between fast food and a home-cooked meal. The quick option fills you, but the body gains little strength from it. In the same way, information provided instantly by AI satisfies an immediate task, but it never trains your cognitive processes. Day after day, you may feel productive, but beneath the surface, your capacity to think deeply erodes. The calories are there, but not the nourishment. Psychology has long recognized this pattern. Researchers call it the path of least resistance. Humans will reliably choose an easier route, especially when effort and reward are disconnected in time. The critical cost shows up in motivation. Once accustomed to quick relief, people find heavier effort increasingly daunting. Returning to unaided reasoning feels like running uphill after months of sitting still. That struggle isn't laziness in the casual sense. It is laziness engineered through habit. Consider a student who once wrote essays alone. After months of AI assistance, the same blank page now triggers instant discomfort. Or a worker who once managed long reports suddenly feels blocked after a single opening line. The knowledge remains, but the tolerance for strain has disappeared. The brain has recalibrated to expect assistance, and its refusal to engage without it masquerades as disinterest. This is more than speculation. Human-computer interaction studies and surveys presented at CHI 2025 show consistent self-reports from knowledge workers. Many describe a noticeable decline in motivation to tackle tasks from beginning to end once they grow reliant on generative AI. They acknowledge that work feels easier, but also flatter. Microsoft's CHI survey reinforced this point with a sharper edge. The more confidence workers expressed in AI's abilities, the less critical reasoning they engaged in themselves. Rather than correcting or questioning, high-confidence users tended to accept, skim, and move on. The conclusion was sobering. Trust in AI can hollow out cognitive effort rather than enhance it. The invisibility of this shift is what makes it dangerous. Nobody feels their prefrontal cortex going quiet while they type prompts. Nobody sees a warning bar when their hippocampus sits idle. They only notice relief. A finished draft, a solved puzzle, a filled page. The subtle loss of endurance remains in the background until a task demands genuine labor. By then, the gap yawns clear. It's not a collapse that announces itself in one day, but an accumulation disguised as progress. If you want a direct measure of your own susceptibility, ask yourself, when was the last time you solved something start to finish without help? A math problem, a written draft, a route on foot, memory recalled instead of searched? If answering that question feels difficult, it signals how quickly this cycle embeds itself. The very discomfort you feel resisting shortcuts is proof your brain has adjusted to easier defaults. Compounding this inner drive are cultural signals that treat convenience as unquestionable good. Schools advertise apps that remove tedious steps. Workplaces encourage employees to streamline with prompts. Ads for consumer software praise instant, frictionless results. The outer environment reinforces the inner bias, as if every signpost urges less effort. When brain wiring already pushes in that direction, resistance weakens further. The shortcut path doesn't just exist. It is celebrated, lit brightly, and rewarded. Seen across a wider lens, AI's influence fits into a broader pattern of technological ease. GPS shaved away the need to recall routes. Streaming services removed choice by autoplaying content. Grammar tools reshaped sentences in real time. Each transition appeared harmless, but together, they conditioned people to surrender mental responsibility step by step. Generative AI represents the most powerful escalation yet, because it doesn't remove just one micro-decision. It can replace an entire sequence of thinking. Some may cling to the reassurance that awareness alone protects them. Surveys tell a different story. Workers often admitted they knew these tools made them less engaged, less willing to grapple directly, but chose them anyway. This reveals the depth of the pattern. Knowledge of the risk doesn't dissolve the appeal, because the brain's chemistry favors the immediate slackening of effort. The cycle, once embedded, doesn't stop without deliberate intervention. Breaking it requires a conscious push, like retraining atrophied muscles. The discomfort of thinking through what could be automated feels jarring precisely because the neural circuits no longer expect it. Yet building back resilience cannot happen without such stress. Each resisted shortcut is not wasted time. It reactivates the same networks that bear the load of reasoning. Without that strain, competence drains quietly away, leaving hollow efficiency in its place. This is why Addicted to Easy is not a moral failing, but a predictable clash between old biology and abundant modern shortcuts. The instinct for conservation keeps firing, only now paired with a technological environment that feeds it endlessly. People interpret this as laziness or distraction, but at its root, it is conditioning that can spread across entire populations of workers, students, and professionals who never intended to weaken themselves. And yet, the story does not end with awareness of behavior. Beneath the habit loops and self-reports, the scans from 2025 offered even sharper proof. When researchers looked directly at the brains of habitual AI users, they didn't just see vague mentions of inattention or drift. They saw specific regions dimming, core areas tied to memory, decision-making, and control. The next stage of the evidence is not about surveys or everyday habits. It is about literal structures in the brain switching off, piece by piece. The brain regions shutting down. When scientists examined brain imaging from the 2025 trials, the patterns were stark. The decline was not just about people feeling less focused or slowing down. The scans revealed that 3 core regions, the prefrontal cortex, the hippocampus, and the anterior cingulate cortex, were consistently less active whenever participants leaned heavily on AI systems. Each one governs a key capability we rely on daily: reasoning, memory, and self-regulation. And each one showed measurable dips in activation under AI assistance, raising concerns that these fundamental capacities are left undertrained when we outsource thinking too often. The prefrontal cortex, located just behind the forehead, is often called the command center of the brain. It is the region you use to hold competing options in mind, plan steps, and rein in impulses before making a choice. Functional scans from the MIT Media Lab preprint, together with parallels from digital addiction research, showed reduced connectivity and weaker signals in this region when participants solved problems with LLM help. Instead of demonstrating the characteristic activity of careful planning, the prefrontal cortex dimmed, as if the heavy work had been passed over to the machine. Neuroscientists cautioned that this reduction, while not permanent proof of damage, indicates underuse. And like any system in the brain, circuits that fire less often gradually weaken in responsiveness. The hippocampus, buried deeper in the brain's medial temporal lobe, is critical for encoding experiences into lasting memory. Every time you work through a problem and commit the process to memory, the hippocampus is the reason the lesson sticks. In the 2025 experiments, participants who relied on AI prompts and generated text showed notably less hippocampal activation. Follow-up testing confirmed weaker recall days and weeks later, suggesting memories weren't consolidating properly. Researchers highlighted that this functional weakening didn't just reduce immediate retention. It meant participants missed the chance to build scaffolding for future learning. Without hippocampal reinforcement, knowledge never becomes durable. While there was no claim that AI use directly caused structural brain change, the persistent underactivation raised concern about long-term risks if this pattern is repeated constantly. The anterior cingulate cortex, a strip of tissue connecting cognitive and emotional systems, was also quieter in the scans. This region helps you spot errors, manage conflicts between choices, and regulate emotions during frustration. It is what lets you acknowledge difficulty and still keep trying. In the AI-assisted sessions, activation in the anterior cingulate dipped significantly. That finding implied that not only were participants outsourcing cognitive tasks, they were also dampening the neural signals that support persistence and frustration tolerance. Fewer signals here could make challenges feel disproportionately taxing, leading people to avoid them altogether. This wasn't about laziness. The data suggested a functional weakening of the very circuitry that makes grit possible. Each of these regions serves a role that viewers can easily grasp. The prefrontal cortex organizes decisions. The hippocampus encodes memory. The anterior cingulate manages conflict and error detection. When all 3 show reduced activation under the same conditions, the pattern is more than coincidence. It represents a synchronized retreat of systems needed for higher thinking. The integrated nature of the brain means these functions don't sit in isolation. Once one hub weakens, others are affected too. Reduced encoding hampers planning. Reduced error detection erodes memory consolidation. The system hollows out together. To help visualize this, neuroscientists likened the brain under heavy AI reliance to a city. Key institutions: the town hall of decision-making, the library of memory, the courthouse of regulation, fall dark one by one. Meanwhile, vending machines dispensing instant answers stay brightly lit. The city still appears alive on the surface, but its deeper infrastructure is quiet. It runs efficiently in the moment, yet loses the capacities that make long-term resilience possible. That single metaphor communicates a simple truth. Rapid convenience can come at the cost of critical civic structures inside the brain. The broader concern is what functional underactivation might mean long-term. MRI data showed some patterns in habitual AI users that echo those seen in clinical research on cognitive decline. Reduced hippocampal activity, weaker prefrontal engagement, and muted anterior cingulate signals overlap, at least functionally, with markers associated with higher dementia risk in other contexts. Crucially, the researchers emphasize this is not direct evidence that AI use causes dementia. These are cautionary echoes, not proofs of disease. To establish real causation would require decades of longitudinal data, but the resemblance alone raised alarms. If the same brain regions repeatedly register silence, they may gradually remodel in ways that resemble decline. Neuroplasticity strengthens what is used, and just as reliably weakens what is neglected. The unsettling part is that the brain provides no instant warning system for this silencing. People don't feel their prefrontal cortex disengaging when a machine drafts their outline. They don't notice hippocampal inactivity when solutions come prepackaged. They walk away with finished output that looks productive. Only later, when they try to recall details or solve something independently, do the gaps emerge. By then, the cycle of underuse has already repeated enough times to reinforce itself. What complicates matters further is the cultural environment. At the same time these findings emerged, workplaces, schools, and apps were formally encouraging reliance on AI tools to boost efficiency. That meant the very tendencies under scrutiny were not just habits, but institutional norms. If entire cohorts adapt their brains under such conditions, the worry expands beyond the individual. A society that fails to train its own decision-making, memory, and self-regulation networks risks a collective erosion of capacity. It may continue to produce outputs, reports, assignments, polished documents, but the deeper reserve of cognitive strength is left diminished. This realization unsettled scientists in 2025 because it shifted the conversation from immediate utility to long-term capacity. Temporary lapses can be reversed with rest, but when entire regions are left underactivated consistently, the risk becomes patterned atrophy. The brain, built to adapt, may recalibrate itself permanently to lower activity levels in areas fundamental to intelligence. Even if further research tempers these early worries, the principle stands. Unused circuits grow weaker. The data showed AI-assisted sessions repeatedly created the conditions for underuse. If these patterns hold, the next question is who faces the greatest risk. Adults with mature brains can experience functional weakening, but younger brains still building their networks may be shaped more fundamentally by these same habits. The transition from temporary functional tuning to permanent rewiring isn't uniform across ages. And that is why the discussions soon turned to the generations most immersed in AI from their earliest years. Gen Z and Gen Alpha at risk. It is one thing when adults with established neural scaffolding rely too much on artificial intelligence. The brain still bears a cost, but its core pathways for reasoning, memory, and self-regulation are already in place. The greater concern is with children and adolescents, where those same pathways are still under construction. For Gen Z and Gen Alpha, AI is stitched directly into the fabric of learning, communication, and self-expression from the start. It is not an add-on introduced later. It is the environment they grow within. That difference carries weight, because their brains are still wiring at maximum plasticity. Recent surveys drive this home. In 2025, an American study found that about a third of parents with children aged 0 to 8 reported that their kids had already used AI in some form for learning. In the UK, more than half of surveyed parents said they worried their children were becoming too dependent on AI for schoolwork. What was once a futuristic concern has settled into the daily lives of families worldwide. Even among very young learners, machine assistance is already normal. Parents described a mix of relief and unease. Relief because homework and projects suddenly became simpler to finish. Unease because they feared the work was no longer strengthening the skills it was meant to train. This brings us to a critical fact about development. Plasticity peaks in youth. Children's brains are far more flexible than adults. A child can absorb new language or master an instrument with relative ease because their circuits are wide open for growth. Yet that same sensitivity means underuse carries heavier costs. According to a 2025 scoping review of digital technology and child development, one of the clearest and most consistent impacts of overuse shows up in the prefrontal cortex. This is the region central to self-control, planning, and reasoning. In adolescence, it is still undergoing refinement. If tasks that should challenge it are outsourced again and again, those circuits may fail to mature to full strength. What an adult might slowly erode after decades of neglect, a child may never properly build at all. Think of it as mistraining. An athlete who skips conditioning during formative years may never develop optimal endurance later, no matter how hard they practice as adults.